may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, let's continue the series where we go through, we talk about those year 2 wide receivers, because I talked about this a couple times now, in that if you look at historical win rates from redraft leagues, what you actually find is you find the second year wide receiver, not the third year wide receiver, actually provides you with the highest historical hit rate. And that's because in today's NFL, you are finding these wide receivers making that significant leap in year 2. Now, we've discussed this earlier, but I mean, that used to be year 3. You used to hear the year 3 wide receiver breakout, the year 3 wide receiver breakout. And I don't necessarily have a great reason on why it's actually the year 2 wide receiver breakout historically over the past 10 seasons or so. I don't necessarily know if we've always been wrong about the year 3 wide receiver breakout when people were talking about it 20 years ago, but maybe it's just these college programs are that much better at developing these wide receivers and getting them ready for the NFL. And we see that jump in year 2. So let's talk about 3 guys here in CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Reagor, and Brandon Aiyuk. But before we get into them, guys, please go down there, drop a like on this video. Y'all destroyed yesterday's video, which is why this one has timestamps. Like I said, guys, I mean, when y'all continue to grow the flock, I'm going to continue to do everything that I can to try to help us out in these videos. But yeah, that's it. Drop that like, leave a comment telling me what players you like from this list, and subscribe to the channel. And let's dive into CeeDee Lamb. Okay, so here with CeeDee Lamb, in high stakes redraft leagues currently, he is going as the wide receiver 13. And in our redraft rankings, we actually have CeeDee Lamb as the wide receiver 12. So we are slightly higher than consensus, not necessarily drastically though. And here with CeeDee Lamb, he is only 22 years old, so he's younger than some of those other players in this past year's NFL draft class. I mean, he's younger than Najee Harris and Devonta Smith as 2 notable names. And what's weird is in those high-stakes redraft leagues, you've actually had CeeDee Lamb rising in fantasy value over the past month or so. I mean, a month ago in those high-stakes redraft leagues, he was being drafted in the early 4th, the very late 3rd. Sometimes you would see him go, but now he's actually consistently going in the middle of the 3rd round in those redraft leagues, which it's notable when you see a player start to move like that, especially when we haven't necessarily had that much buzz about CeeDee Lamb. And what we usually see with player movement going into the NFL season is usually it's for good reason. Most of the time, it's us understanding how the snap shares are going to break down as well as the targets. I mean, obviously, there are always going to be the movers that don't necessarily make sense. It's more so just maybe one analyst pushing a player over and over and over again, or a head coach coming out and just giving puff pieces to a player and we overreact. But in the case of CeeDee Lamb, I don't really see any of that going on. This looks like a collective movement to move him up draft boards. And I want to stand by the fact, I know we've gotten a lot of hate for this and a lot of pushback, but if you go back and you look at the CeeDee Lamb profile coming out of Oklahoma, I think CeeDee Lamb has been the best wide receiver draft prospect over the past 3 years. I mean, if you're looking at CeeDee Lamb compared to Jamar Chase, I understand Jamar Chase, you look at his size, you look at his own athletic profile, and you look at what he did in 2019, and Jamar Chase is an elite level prospect. But that is nothing to take away from CeeDee Lamb, who himself is 6'2", 198 pounds. And I know he doesn't have that elite level athleticism like a Jamar Chase. And y'all know that at the running back position, we chase athleticism, athleticism, athleticism over and over and over again because of its translation over to real life NFL success as well as fantasy success. But at the wide receiver position, it's a little bit different. What you want at the wide receiver position is you're looking for that collegiate production, which CeeDee Lamb was off the chart with. I mean, here he was a breakout his true freshman season at Oklahoma. He was dominant at Oklahoma whenever he was the main guy. So CeeDee Lamb, literally an elite level prospect. Then he comes into the NFL and he starts off dominating. I mean, it's kind of a tale of 2 seasons. Because obviously you have the Dak Prescott injury in week 5. But before the Dak Prescott injury, CeeDee Lamb at 21 years old, in the first month of his NFL career, he was the wide receiver 16 in points per game. Now without Dak, he was actually the wide receiver 42. So it's just night and day with what you saw from CeeDee Lamb last year, but it's completely understandable. And if you look around the rest of the offense in Dallas in that 5-week stretch with Dak Prescott, I mean, Amari Cooper barely outscored CeeDee Lamb. Amari Cooper averaged 17.8 points per game compared to CeeDee Lamb's 17.1. Keep in mind, last season, we did not get a preseason. We did not get an extended training camp because of COVID. I mean, CeeDee Lamb came in without really having any practice under his belt at all and was just dominant to start the season with Dak Prescott last year. And I understand a lot of people are going to be going down there, and for a great reason. They're going to be going, but Mason, Dak was completely unsustainable last year. You can't just be looking at those numbers expecting it to translate over, and I will agree with you on that. I mean, Dak Prescott, if he was sustainable from what we had at the start of last year, clearly this is a player that would be drafted as the quarterback 1 overall. I mean, out there, he had 44 pass attempts a game, 371 passing yards a game. I will say, what you actually want to look at and why I think that while his overall volume is going to go down with both the pass attempts and the passing yards, but I think we can still see the same amount of fantasy production coming out of this offense, is in that small sample, Dak Prescott actually kind of ran unlucky with the touchdowns that he had. Despite having 44 pass attempts a game, he actually only scored 1.8 passing touchdowns a game, and we understand that those passing touchdowns are extremely volatile. I mean, they're very, very hard to predict. And what you actually have is touchdown volatility going up and down, up and down, up and down until it kind of stabilizes out. So just because Dak Prescott wasn't necessarily scoring touchdowns at a high clip to start the season last year doesn't mean that's what you should be expecting this upcoming season. So even if the overall volume of the passing offense goes down in both the pass attempts a game as well as the passing yards a game, what you can find is you can find the passing touchdown percentage for Dak Prescott returning to his career average, and that would kind of offset what you're seeing in the difference in volume. And here, if you're going to be projecting CeeDee Lamb to take a step forward, because obviously he's going to take a step forward with his talent, but is he going to take a step forward with his opportunity? I think that we can actually see CeeDee Lamb get more targets in this offense with the overall offensive volume going down, because last season, in that stretch where you had Dak Prescott as the starting quarterback, Dalton Schultz actually averaged 12.6 points per game. Now, that's something that nobody is expecting this upcoming year. So I think what you're going to have is I think you're going to have some of those targets that were going over to Dalton Schultz. You're going to start seeing those go in the direction of a CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb running over the middle of the field, running out of the slot, compared to Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup on the outside. If anybody's taking those tight end targets away from Dalton Schultz, it's going to be CeeDee Lamb. So I'm very excited about it. I mean, also, the Dallas Cowboys ran 70% of their plays out of a 3 wide receiver set last season. So all signs point to CeeDee Lamb, elite level wide receiver in 2021. I have him ranked as a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2, and I stand by that ranking. But please let me know what y'all think down there in the comments. Now, let's get our next guy up here, someone that I hated in Dynasty rookie drafts last offseason. Let's talk about Jalen Reagor. And here, Jalen Reagor is going as the wide receiver 57 off the board. So he's essentially free. I mean, he's being drafted as a wide receiver 6. And in our rankings, he actually is the wide receiver 60. So we are slightly lower than consensus on Jalen Reagor. I'll say that mainly why I have him down there at the wide receiver 60 and not even lower is because when you're drafting wide receivers in the range that Jalen Reagor is going in, what we are looking for that late in drafts where the majority of the time you're going to be cutting that player for a waiver wire option anyway, is we are just going upside, upside, upside. And you can't deny the fact that Jalen Reagor does present some upside here with this overall profile, because a lot of people love Jalen Reagor going into the NFL draft last year. I mean, there were a lot of fantasy football analysts that had Jalen Reagor ranked ahead of Justin Jefferson. Now, obviously, that is laughable. Obviously, nobody is having that opinion now. I wish you would have remembered the names of people who were actually doing that, but that's besides the point. But with Jalen Reagor, I will say, if you liked him last offseason, you should probably like him this season as well, because he has excuses for underperforming last year. I mean, he actually started the season off dealing with a shoulder dislocation and a labral tear. I mean, that's significant. He has a UCL tear in his thumb in week 2, which required surgery. And then in week 17, he also suffered a concussion. So this is a player that dealt with a significant amount of injuries to start the season last year. I mean, a season that he didn't get the preseason for, a season that he really had limited reps overall. So it's going to be very hard to expect a wide receiver like that to go be highly productive. And of course, he wasn't productive last year. I mean, he was the wide receiver 86 in points per game last year with 5 targets a game, 36 yards a game, and he only had 1 total touchdown. But let's not focus in too much on those stats, because I think with Jalen Reagor, what you're mainly looking at is you're looking at the college profile. You're trying to figure out, hey, was this a wide receiver we should have been excited about last offseason? Are there still reasons to be excited about him going forward? And I'll just keep it very short. I did not like Jalen Reagor going into the NFL draft. I did not like him in fantasy drafts last year, because I think that the metrics community was viewing his profile in a wrong light, and he was getting too much credit for his college quarterback play being subpar. But let's kind of put that aside, because I'm sure you already have your opinion on the talent of Jalen Reagor. So let's talk about the situation that he's going into in 2021 and why I think this is a situation we should be fading. So y'all know I didn't like Jalen Reagor in the draft last year, but we loved Jalen Hurts in our Superflex Dynasty leagues. I mean, Jalen Hurts was a quarterback we were taking over and over and over again. And this is because he possessed that elite rushing upside. But with Jalen Hurts, this is not someone you are drafting for high passing volume. This is not someone that you're going to be taking expecting an elite level of production, because you go through and you look at his stats from last year. And I know a lot of people have a hard time looking at his stats just because, I mean, he was active in a lot of games that he wasn't actually starting. So it's really skewing off the overall numbers, but you just have to dive in, look at the actual game log, pull out the little handy calculator that I got before every single video, and just figure this stuff out. And here, Jalen Hurts in his starting games averaged 33 pass attempts a game, 17 completions a game, which isn't nearly enough to be looking to support top-end wide receivers, 229 passing yards a game, which would have put him 23rd in the NFL, and it was right in front of Drew Lock. So that's in the range of where Jalen Hurts was having that passing volume, and only 1.25 passing touchdowns a game. Now, I know a lot of people are going to make the argument, well, Mason, week 17, he got pulled, he got benched, but we can't take out that game. I mean, he did not miss that much time. Nate Sudfeld only got 12 attempts in that game regardless. And at the same time, that's a game he started. I mean, that's a valid data point. Now, why I still love Jalen Hurts in fantasy for this upcoming season is because in that starting stretch, he averaged 68 rushing yards a game, which is Lamar Jackson level. He averaged 3 touchdowns for every 4 games. So, I mean, I'm very excited for Jalen Hurts in fantasy, but he's not going to be a quarterback posting numbers where you can get excited about multiple passing options. I mean, you already have Devonta Smith coming into this offense. Smith should be the wide receiver 1 here day 1. I mean, they traded up to 10 overall to draft Devonta Smith. Also, they have Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert, I would not be surprised if he leads this team in targets. So with Jalen Reagor, I know you may have liked him in the NFL draft last year, but I really want to highlight how bad the situation is going to be for him to have anything this upcoming season when you're looking at the fact that he's the 3rd option at best on an offense that's not going to have a ton of passing volume. So let's get our last guy up here. Now, someone you can get very excited about. Let's talk about Brandon Aiyuk, who was drafted with the 25th pick overall in the NFL draft last year. And right now in fantasy drafts, he's going as wide receiver 26. And we have him significantly higher than that. We have him as a mid wide receiver 2 in fantasy over there with our 2021 rankings. Now with Brandon Aiyuk, I know if you look at the overall season long numbers, it's going to be difficult to see what actually happened. So if you look at the overall points per game numbers, it looks like he was the wide receiver 19 in points per game. But if you take out the weeks that he left early due to injury, he was actually the wide receiver 14 in points per game. That's his rookie season. He was the wide receiver 14 in points per game in games where he was actually healthy. Now, what we really need to look at is the situation changing from what it was his rookie season to what it will be in 2021. Because not only do you have a quarterback change, but you also have the number 1 target in this offense coming back in George Kittle. So while I would love to say, hey, Brandon Aiyuk finished as the wide receiver 14 in fantasy last year on a points per game basis. That was his rookie year. Let's throw him up and have him as a top 10 wide receiver this season. You simply can't do it when he was putting up those stats without George Kittle, because we know George Kittle coming back in, he's going to lead this team in targets. It doesn't matter if Brandon Aiyuk gets better at the game of football, gets better with the game plan. I mean, he's still going to have to take a backseat to George Kittle and lose some of that target share that he had this past season. But there are positives on the flip side of this as well. So you have the transition at quarterback coming over to Trey Lance, which we've showed you the historical research. I am confident in saying that Trey Lance is going to be a starting quarterback for this team by week 4. I mean, I would put money on that bet. But here with Trey Lance, what you love to see is you love to see how aggressive he was throwing the ball deep downfield in college. I mean, that's what he was known for. He was known to be that Josh Allen quarterback that, yes, he's mobile. I mean, he's going to pick up a ton of rushing yards. He's going to pick up rushing touchdowns. But at the same time, he's not going to be someone that's standing in the pocket looking to check it down to the running back out of the backfield. No, I mean, if his options aren't open, he is getting outside the pocket. He's looking deep downfield to hit that deep target, which is Brandon Aiyuk in this offense. And we can see this with the average depth of target for the wide receivers here. Last year, I mean, you had Brandon Aiyuk a little over 9 with his average depth of target, which isn't at the very top end of the NFL, but it's not like he's running routes underneath either. But what you love to see if you're trying to draft Brandon Aiyuk, and this is why we are all out on him, and I made multiple videos talking about why he is such a bad draft pick, but Deebo Samuel was the last wide receiver in the NFL in his average depth of target last season with 2.02. Now, with Trey Lance, a quarterback that is known for being aggressive with how he's throwing the ball down the field, that's known as a guy that doesn't need to check the ball down because he has the talent with his legs. Who do you think he's going to be going towards more often? Do you think he's going to be going with a Deebo Samuel that's running a crossing route across the line of scrimmage? Or he's going to be going with the guy that's making a double move further down the field, and he's actually going to have time to let that route develop because Trey Lance can make things happen with his legs. Now, thank you, my dudes. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. And of course, go down there, drop that like, leave that comment, subscribe to the channel if y'all enjoyed it, and I'll see y'all with the video tomorrow. I want to give a big thank you for everyone joining the flock over there on Patreon. In Castro, Brian, Mike, Jay, Samuel, Billy, Rocky, Bailey, Zachary,